Hi there, everybody. My name is Kate, and welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about the inner child and what we see going on in the world, and a different perspective, perhaps, than what is commonly observed. Excuse me. We all have inner children. We all have the sparks within us of divinity, and that is not what I'm speaking of. The spark of divinity is that pure state of creation that we all came out of, and that we are here in the emanation of that creation force. We are the individuation of that. The inner child is, I'm talking the psychological profile, the actual psyche of the human, rather than the soul or the spirit or the essence, whatever you call the zhuj, that divine spark, the God particle, if you will. That is separate and apart from the identity that we pull into and develop when we take our creation spark out into the world here, and we are managed and told what to believe and how to show up and how to give, how to receive, all these different things. And so that part, the inner child, is what I'm talking about. I call the divine spark, I often call that child magical, because it's a very innocent place and it's very pure. However, it doesn't mean that it's childish. It means it's child magical, the wonder of curiosity and, inquisitive study, and wow, what is this? This is really fascinating, being wowed by the world. That's child magical to me, and that lives in the same department, with divinity, the God spark. And the inner child is the one that psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry, etc., Western modeling anyway, we've talked a lot about the inner child and inner child wounding. And what ends up happening is, when you have injury as you're developing and you're coming from darker agendas, or you are influenced heavily by darker agendas, once you're here, whatever it is that keeps that oppressive force down is irrelevant. It's really a matter that we are kept in a state of just kind of denial, and denial as in you're denied anything that will affirm your creation force or affirm anything beautiful about you, anything that will affirm that child magical. We're going to get to that child magical the way that we can, which is through the psyche of the human being. We can't damage that child magical, that divine spark. Darkness can't harm light, dark force can't harm light. However, the form of a human that's carrying debt, karma, misunderstanding, and a whole lot of, gaslighting and delusion on their back at this point, that person can get real bogged down in the psyche of all of it. And it's the heaven and earth connection, to me, is right through that heart, where we're bringing the mind, which is that human psyche part, together with the God spark, or that creation spark, the God particle. When we marry those up and we come together through the truth activator here, speak the truth, know the truth, be the truth, see the truth, receive and believe the truth. You embody the truth, and you are the truth, and truth is love. Love is truth. It's the same thing. The best love that we can give is to be honest with ourselves and with other people, period, and establish really good, respectful boundaries that denote that we understand that level of reverence and respect for one another. We're nowhere near that yet, just as a species. We're not anywhere near that yet. However, that's the trajectory in the age of Aquarius. In the age of Pisces, it's going to be all this crap you see, which is the division of the psyche part of humans away from their God particle. We're going to keep that separate, and the mystery of how do I keep showing up to the matrix and succeed while some people are, some people aren't. It creates a lot of chaos, and it creates a lot of confusion about how do I actually, if I wish to be seeking the light, how do I get there more successfully, especially when there are opposing forces, literally, that are going to fill in the gaps anywhere where I have doubt, anywhere where I'm, feeling vulnerable in my thought process, anywhere where I haven't, figured this out, the gnosis hasn't come yet. That's a vulnerable point, a point of entry for dark thought, dark agenda, gaslighting, manipulation, trauma, all of that. And when we are literally children, and we are really monkeyed with in ways that are, the human mind doesn't understand it to begin with, and a child's mind has absolutely no frame of reference to contextualize the trauma, the drama, and all of the horror that many people have seen. And at this point, if we haven't directly seen it, we've all been exposed to knowing it exists at levels that, we really just wanted to believe weren't possible. And some people are still believing aren't possible. However, there are people who want to know, how do I retrieve myself from all of this mess, this chaos, and this stuff that just feels so horrible? And what's the point anyway? What's the point anyway is that child magical part is the one that can help. It's in the heart. It's the one that can reach that psyche and is desperately trying. And when we're out here with unhealed inner child wounding, which we all have some amount of wounding growing up and figuring out that life isn't as, delightful as it was before we got here in a pure state, we have some polarity here that bumps up against us. And so we've all experienced that reminder call of how, I'm not in the unified field anymore. I'm in a different venue now. We've all experienced that. The extent to which we've experienced that in violent ways is different. However, we've all experienced the traumatic, reminder that, oh my goodness, I'm disconnected from my most direct experience of source energy, of the God particle of me. It's just that most of us really haven't been told that, oh yeah, that's a deliberate attempt to keep you from finding that spark, and that the way that we actually move through all of that trauma and stuff is to go look for the spark in here and to speak to that inner child. A lot of people find great success with that. I personally use internal family systems to kind of work through the human psyche to do that. However, it technically really doesn't matter as long as we're answering the need of the inner child wounding, commiserate with the healing that can happen from child magical. Inner child wounding can take us to those places where we've been denied something, we've been traumatized, we've been told we don't have any value, we don't have any worth, etc., to the point that we are withheld from basic common resources of everyone else. Love is a free resource, and when we do not receive that, or it's tainted, or it's coming with real confusing messaging, love begins to feel like it's not really stable, it's not really real, it's not really the thing that in here that I feel. When child magical is activated, you feel that purity, and every single one of us, before we made our mind one way or the other, or wobble right there, the decision point of whether we're going to be good or bad. Most of us, when we experience that as a child, we absolutely remember that. We've experienced that pure state of, oh wow, this is really cool, I'm curious about my world. And then however many times that was interrupted, disrupted, or dramatically or chaotically changed, and the venue swiftly moved into something painful, uncomfortable, confusing, scary, overwhelming, emotionally, flooding. All of those things, those are points at which the inner child, the wounding takes place, and child magical then gets suited up to be able to move through those recovery points if they're engaged. However, we disconnect from those because the pain of having to really come into understanding that human beings are not very loving towards one another. We come from pure love. However, we don't express that out here very well. And when we feel like we're not even worthy of the basic free, common universal energy of love, and I'm not even worth that, and I'm growing up with trauma and reminders all the time, and I'm in a brutal family where I'm chum and water constantly, excuse me, and I'm playing, really harsh games, etc. It's very hard to activate, that child magical part, because child magical is busy having to allow the the inner child, who has the tipping point, who has the powers in the driver's seat. That inner child, we answer to the least evolved place in us, the most injured place in us, the most wounded place in us, the most traumatized, whether it's, known or unknown, repressed or expressed. It really doesn't matter. If it's not processed, we answer to the most traumatic thing that's happened to us. Our behavior at that point has been changed and altered to wherever it is that it lands, and we answer to that spot from everywhere from that point on, we're going to understand ourselves to be that filled with shame, that filled with trauma, that filled with drama, that filled with whatever. It's not a conscious process. It's not like we're sitting around, ticking off, yeah, okay, I've got 100 more units of awful on me, I've got that now. It isn't that. It's just that the assumption of weight, the assumption of debt onto us, the karmic misunderstanding continues to pile up, and sorry about that, we continue to separate and move away from one another and from ourselves. And when we move away from ourselves, we split off into being these angry, belligerent leader types who are, controlling the world, because that toddler grew up into positions of power all over the place. And right now, all those positions of power that grew up all over the place and are really, toddling hard and having tantrums everywhere, you see them because the final push for its inner child time and child magical time to have that dance and stop dancing out here with the devil, stop creating, devilish situations or imbalances everywhere to keep that inner child dancing and screaming and carrying on, so that it keeps it busy and distracted from the child magical who's going, excuse me, I'm right here, I can help you, I want to help you, I very much, am looking to help you, I am you, I love you, I'm pure, etc. However, we're not going to want to really move into that space if A, we've never been given permission to do that safely, we don't know how, and if we also think that love is really a variable thing, it changes depending on how you behave, it depends on who it is that you're talking about, whether you love them or not. I used to love you, now I don't. Love is a stable force, much like gravity. It's just, it is. It's not something that we turn off and on. We close ourselves off and we shut the valve off. However, we do not stop the frequency of love. It is the foundation of the planet. It's based on the frequency of love. It's a stable force. And so if we're not really getting that, though, we're going to fight against it and act as if we are not turning ourselves off from it. And when we are doing that off and on thing, we're really not in a flow state where we're going to get the full benefit of what a full infusion of pure love feels like. We never get that close because we're constantly doing little short bursts of, dopamine hit here, cool, dopamine hit here, cool. That's not very satisfactory. It leaves us in the toddler state that we're in, gobbling down, handfuls of candy as we're running through stores and stuff, doing things, acting, untoward. And it's because the injury to inner child needs to be dealt with in a way that understands these are traumatized parts within us. And if we don't acknowledge that there's any trauma, then we've already shut out a conversation, and we're only willing to, open the valve when there's something exciting that mimics, the love that we've been playing out here, which is highly combative. It mimics that. And so we're going to answer the heart need with the out here need to be marauding, plundering, pirates, stealing, thieving, lying, cheating, whatever we're doing that's not meeting the need in here. That's an internal battle that we keep coming out here purchasing or imbibing in, being addicted to, spending our time rotating around. We do all these things because we're desperately seeking, in my humble opinion, to reach the balance in here, because the part in here is the stable force. The heart is the stable foundation for heart-mind coherence. The heart starts that. The heart is the one that emanates that. However, it's the mind that's the gatekeeper to it and can really put the, kibosh on, no, I'm not going to do that, through the programming, through the contortions and the distortions, the delusions, the gaslighting and the bullshit, quite frankly, that weak people who've not been really put in a position of having to really, move through that heart space to survive things and have been deprived of basic, common decency, etc., or they've had trauma where they really are assuming the worst about their inner child because their inner child is what's being attacked. The child magical is the one that is the pure stable force to say, yeah, no, I'm not really that. However, if we don't ever want to have that discussion because we're enjoying it out here, we're really digging the 3D thing, or we're too frightened, we've never had to really come to grips with the idea that this is really me, I'm just a dill hole, and maybe people, are frightened by me. Maybe this, extreme, moves of power and just real aggressive stuff, maybe that's not coming across very well. Perhaps I want to consider, what it is from somebody else's perspective. And, people that aren't willing to do that, they're still up here in the inner child who's stomping around in a Walmart, perhaps having a fit, raking things onto the floor and, throwing things everywhere because they're not getting what they want, and creating scenes everywhere. That's why you see Ken and Karen popping off, all over the place. That's why you see, and yet we feed more of that inner child wounding by having TikTok compilations of terrible Karen and terrible Ken. And what we really would better nourish the inner child, the child magical, is to not really answer to the inner child who's having a tantrum, who's having a moment understanding what discipline is, that you may not have cookies for dinner. That's not a meal that's going to sustain you. We'll talk about how you can have your goodie, how you can have your treat. However, your life as a treat, when it's unresolved and we've been held back from having anything in our life that we consider valuable and a treat, or the treats were dictated what a treat is, when we've had that kind of a background, we're out here looking for all our treats as 60, 70, 80, 20, 40, whatever year old people with unresolved trauma, unresolved issues of personality parts within us, or child parts within us, wounded parts, whatever you call that, the roles that we play, the masks that we wear, those are all adaptations and defense mechanisms of someone in our prior existence who couldn't cope with whatever was coming across the table at them. And that's what they did. They suited up in this direction. However, it mimics what we know, perhaps, as what love is. However, the stable force of love feels good all the time. It feels good in here. It doesn't feel good necessarily to hear the truth of somebody's telling me, man, your sloppy performance, it's not good. However, it's made much easier, and it feels really good to sink in and know that I've been seen whenever I'm across the table from somebody who is giving me that honest, loving review, and they're actually acting loving, etc. And they're supportive in that. If I turn around and smack that in the face or punch it, how much do you think that truth is going to want to come and hang out with me, because I'm clearly in opposition to it? And if that dichotomy is living in me, and it is, therein lies the battle of the good and evil, that none of us are going to win, none of us are going to conquer, none of us are going to dance with or cajole or bring into any alignment unless we're willing to get a hold of our fear, and willing to get a hold of the idea that, there's nothing more special or less special about me or you. We all have psyches, we all have damage, we all have psychological profiles that could really use some tweaking in our behavior to make us better human beings. That's just what the evolutionary process of any creature is to be better, be a better species. And somehow we're out here thinking that we're a better species because we found a way to hard charge our technology well beyond our heart space and our ability to have empathy, that we've developed so many systems that are literally just dying off the whole entire species. We're self-immolating and not even noticing, because busy being in, Walmart having a tantrum as a child that has no idea that what you're doing costs a lot here. And as the parent, when we don't step in with our own selves, we let ourselves make decisions that are costing great amount of collateral damage to ourselves and to other people. And that's where karma gets to be a real bitch to have to pay back, because it's payback time. And karma went into cosmic collections. There's not, in my life anyway, there isn't anybody that I'm going to be doing direct transfer with for karma exchange anymore. Those days are over, because we've come to the point where, if you haven't answered the tab yet, the last call was put out a while ago, and if you haven't paid your tab yet, it's no longer responsible for the bar owner to come and say, yeah, they're not the bouncer coming to get their funds. And it's not that, I subscribe to the war and haha, it's really hilarious and funny. It's quite tragic to watch people having to pay back the debt that they didn't even realize that they were going to have to one day, or that they falsely believed I could outrun, another lifetime or another go round, another whatever their process is from whatever place they're coming from. However, there's a lot of shock, dismay, and oh my God, what the hell, except that regardless of how we arrived at that point, the answer is the same: to connect the conversation between the human psyche and the child magical, the inner child with the experience here through the heart, that heart experience that can open up and be the pure force, that doesn't have that gatekeeper, the toddler running around terrorizing the joint, or sitting in a corner going, oh no, because we can't do that either. No place where we're going to have childish behavior. We cannot allow that to be what is in charge of our identity, because when it is, you get this breakdown and it causes a lot of physical damage, financial damage, spiritual damage, just damage everywhere. So, excuse me, the way to mitigate that is to have the conversation and get over the fact that everybody had a childhood. Ain't nobody born, a grown-ass mean adult. They just aren't. We're grown into that. We have predisposition for it. It's a nature and a nurture. Thank you. It's a nature and a nurture. And so we can all say definitively, whatever my childhood baggage is, it's up to me. And however it is that's leaking out here, it's fundamentally mine to take care of, and it's fundamentally yours to take care of your business. And when we come together and we have two toddlers getting together playing, war games in the middle of Walmart, the people that are there just for their bananas and their, bag of rice that costs $28, they really just don't want to have to sacrifice, excuse me, one of their children to get through the dairy aisle. You know what I'm saying? So this is where the decisions matter, and beginning to have those honest conversations about, you got wounding. Whenever you act like that, there's wounding in you. And, it could be done with people who are very kind and loving and, supportive, etc. However, if you keep shooting that in the face, or you keep, spitting on it, etc., that eventually, at least in my life, I leave people, okay, there's nothing I can do. I'm wasting resources begging you to want to care about something that you either don't want to care about, don't know about, don't want to know about. Whatever it is, there's resistance. What more does a body need to know than to come in here and say, child magical is non-resistance. Any resistance we feel is in us, in other people, and it's our job to heal regardless of whether we like the labels, regardless of whether we like to admit that we have weak spots, whether we like to admit we were wrong, whether we like to admit that we're awful people or that we're behaving like awful people. The truth remains that when we harm other people, that is not acceptable on this planet. It is not okay. It's an imbalance, and it is dealt with very harshly now to bring those imbalances back into rebalance and to integrate that trauma in ways that are not quite as hostile. However, we do have to go along with the process, and anywhere we aren't, that's where you see what is breaking down exponentially. So the way to deal with that is to speak to child magical, connect to inner child, and I'll do me and let you do whatever it is that you need to do in your world. With my blessings, without them, doesn't matter. You're off to do you. I disconnect from you and start having my conversation in here so that I can deal with how I'm going to mitigate my fear rather than battle yours in Walmart. Wonder why you're, not doing something to hamper your child, why you're not doing something. I'm not in it. My name's Bennett and I ain't in it. My name's Bennett and I'm in it over here somewhere else. Not observing that, putting energy on it, and then being drawn into the dog fights eventually. That's like cockfighting. It's the same thing. That's why there's a million videos of Karen losing her mind at the gas station and Ken, going completely commando in his neighborhood with his, combat gear on. So that's why you have that, is that if we're not actually playing those games, the fact that we'd be sitting around observing them, we're still in it. We're still in the vibe, and we're still in the injury that would allow us to believe that, watching the suffering of some other human being having a psychological meltdown or having a physical issue, I don't want to see it no matter what it is. It's disturbing to me personally. However, that's because the conversation between head and heart, inner child that's wounded, and heart space that understands what's really real, is the child magical knows that I deserve to have a far better childhood, and the people that were exerting and squirting the disaster shitbag stuff that I got, they deserve to have it just as good as I did, and they didn't, and that's why they passed the buck. However, I'm not responsible for taking the buck. I'm also not responsible for sitting there and using that buck and calling that good. It's not enough. Your buck when I was born, it's well worn out. It's used to me. Excuse me, it's tired, and it comes with a whole lot of cost to have to use that buck. So rather than pass it, I can have compassion and understanding for the people who were trained just as badly, maybe even more badly than me. However, I'm still going to need to pick up the pieces of my disastrous energy, whatever it is, whatever my disastrous situation is. It's still mine to pick up, no matter whether I was buffaloed in or I walked in willingly. We've done both. And when we have that kind of understanding, awareness, and compassion for ourselves, we can have it for other people, and then step away. No contact for me personally, step away with compassion of understanding that I know why this happened. However, the behavior hasn't changed, and I don't do this anymore. Good luck with you. And if there had been, willingness from the other side in my own personal life, we would have worked that out, and we still may have come to the conclusion of we're not going to spend any more time together. However, there's a kind way that loving exchange can happen as you dissolve and as you separate. It's a matter that people like to play war. They like to declare a winner. Then okay, there's not much that I as one individual in that situation can do except allow people to, okay, you won, and let them win and walk away. And if I can't do that, why do I care? What part of my inner child inventory is so wounded that it believes I can't allow a bunch of thieves to believe that they've won? You did steal. You stole my innocence briefly. However, I found it again. And because of that, friend, I don't have to hate you. And I also don't ever have to see you again. That's a beautiful freedom on both sides of that, because I can love and be free to love wherever I choose to be, that accepts me, that loves me, and that treats me equally in that give and receive exchange that feels so much better when this is connected here and I'm connecting with other people who are connected here as well. That's where it really is for me personally. I think it's where it is for everybody. However, we're obviously not all headed there. So anyway, take care of yourself. As I said, no, I didn't say that. Take care of yourself and enjoy your day no matter what part of the day you're in, and remember to get within your skin because you're divine. It is so, so gorgeous, magical. Your child magical is absolutely divine. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Please tickle that, talk to that, and really sweetly, gingerly speak to that with so much kindness, and allow that to be the voice that comes through and helps that inner child deal with what is truly the you of you, and not all the bullshit histrionics and suiting up weird in Walmart that we've all been forced to do. So take care, as I said, and get within your skin because you're divine, absolutely fine. You look gorgeous, and I'll see you again next time. Bye, friends.